So I think it's 10:01 and we should get started. I'm going to be the moderator. I'll take your questions through the chat. This is just an informal Zoom chat. We can spending time with Kappa friends and talking about whatever we want to talk about regarding our cars. And Mike is the person who came up with this idea, and he's also going to be taking questions and moderating with the panelists or whoever wants to speak. I'm just providing the service for the Zoom meeting. We might actually change the format depending on whether people feel safe in this environment or not. Just to let you know, this is a University of Minnesota account, and it has all the security upgrades that have come up in the recent weeks. And the University of Minnesota is still using it, and I feel comfortable with it. But we can certainly look at other platforms if people feel better about it. So, Mike, your show.
Boom! Talk about a immediate start. Yeah, like what Salvador was saying, I kind of come up with this idea. It's not, I mean, it's certainly nothing new, but since everybody's kind of somewhat stuck at home, I thought it'd be kind of neat to maybe do some Zoom conferences. And if this goes well, maybe we'll do it either once a week or once every couple of weeks. And hopefully it does go well. And I see, more people are kind of coming online here because we're at the 10 o'clock hour, but at least Central Time. But yeah, we have our panelists. And when we were originally kind of thinking about this, we're thinking about let's try to make a standard like topic for each one, and then we'll kind of gear the conversation towards there, but we're not limited to that topic. So if you have a question about something else, feel free to throw it out at us, and we'll go ahead and talk about it, especially this first one here. But just to introduce everyone, I'm Mike, and we have Salvador, who's our snow queen over there, snow king. I don't know why I said snow queen, snow king in Minnesota. And we have Troy over in California. John, I don't know where are you at? You're Colorado or something?
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, it's close. And then we have Kappa, which is Brian. And Brian actually, and I didn't realize this until recently, he actually works at a hospital. So he's been working a lot of hours, but he's very well known for all the stuff that he does in the Kappa community as well. So that being said, we actually have on my side, on my screen, it's actually on the right, but if you have any kind of questions or anything like that, just go ahead and type it in. We'll be able to see those, and we'll answer them the best that we can. And we did have a couple of questions that somebody sent me ahead of time that we can start at. And one of them was talking about oil changes. And I'm sure the whole, that you're going to have the whole gamut as far as what type of oil you use. But I think the main question was, based on your driving performance or your driving style, how many times should you change your oil and things like that? So if any guys on the panel want to get started with that answer, then we'll keep on going.
I think one thing I want to interject real quick, as far as oil type, my son actually had this issue. There's a lot of debate whether you want to go conventional or synthetic, but really what it comes down to, the most important thing about the oil you choose is the weight. And you should stick by your manufacturer's recommendations for that, which I believe for the Kappa is 5W30, pretty common oil weight, so we're good. But to share his story real quick and how much of a difference this makes, he has a 92 3000 GT VR4 from Mitsubishi. And that car generally recommends to run a very heavyweight oil, like a 15W45. And he decided, oh, well, oil had just come a long way, and I don't need to run that thick of oil, so I'll throw a thinner oil in it. So this week we put it into the shop to replace the engine because he spun a bearing because the oil was too thin and couldn't lubricate the bearings, and he got rod knock. So please, no matter if you choose synthetic or conventional or partial synthetic, make sure you stick to the correct weight of oil for our engines because that is critical.
And luckily, it actually says it on the oil cap, what weight we're supposed to use. So you don't even have to memorize it. Now, how accurate do you think the oil life thing is on your dash?
Personally, I live by it. I've had 3 GMs since 2003. One had 180,000 miles on it running strong. My truck currently is at 260,000 miles. My Kappa was at 149,000. All of them I go by the engine oil life monitor. All of them I use synthetic, and I haven't had a lick of problems. The engines look really good when they come out. Well, at least the Kappa did, because that's the one I've taken out. So I would say that's fairly accurate. And it uses coolant temperature, mileage, engine runtime, average engine RPM, and a couple other factors to calculate that mileage. So it's not just like, hey, 3,000 miles, change your oil. It actually really goes through and gives an idea of how you're driving your car, and based on that, when it suggests you how much oil life you have remaining.
There's been a lot of discussion about that on the forum over the years, and it basically supports what you just said. It's very accurate. It's designed by a bunch of software dweebs under the control of mechanical engineers, and you can't get much more anal retentive than that.
I do have a question about winter storage, though, because every cycle I do an oil change regardless of the oil measure in the gauge.
So what we do is we have a end of season garage day, and anybody that's due for an oil change, we change the oil then. And then we have a beginning of season garage day, and anybody that we basically do an annual oil change for anybody that didn't do it in the last fall. When you're putting your car away, one of the most critical things you can do, whether you change the oil or not, is run it long enough to make sure you cause the water that's in the oil to evaporate and it'll be stable over the winter. The worst thing you can do is start the car and let it run for 5 minutes and not come fully up to temperature and then shut it off. Those cycles will kill the oil, and it leaves the contaminants and the water in the oil, and that's what does the damage.
Okay, we have a few questions on the chat already, and one is, if it's not due, should you still change your oil at least once per year?
Yes.
And then the other one is 2007 base with 3,000 miles. For the last year, I've changed all fluids and tires. It has the seat sag. Should I try to fix that, or should just not worry? Will it hurt the leather seat? Anything else you recommend I look at maintenance-wise?
There's actually a post on the forum that was done by Joe at JPM where he built a how-to to repair that seat. The earlier cars had a softer foam in it that tended to crush, and he goes through with pictures and text how to remove the seat cushion, the cover, and then he actually forms a repair piece of harder foam, puts it on top, and it returns the seat to service.
Well, go back to the oil change real quick and the monitor, light monitor or whatever. Has anybody ever checked, like, okay, you hit 100, you hit 0%, you got to change your oil, how many miles that is? Or whether you do synthetic or standard oil, if that changes how many miles and how many, and when that monitor brings you down to, hey, you got to change it now.
It's designed to operate with the recommended oil, so it's synthetic in all the turbo cars for sure, and I think it's in the 2.4 as well.
Because I'm just wondering, if I do a lot of like autocross and aggressive driving, is that monitor going to tell me, hey, after 4,000 miles, change it, as opposed to, you know, the Sunday driver that drives it once a week? You might get
it's got an algorithm that watches how you drive the car, and it's got a number of criteria that it uses, and it'll tell you it earlier or later, depending on how you drive.
Okay.
I'm getting, I mean, you know, I autocross mine on occasion, and so I'm probably getting about, I'd say, 6,000 to 7,000 out of an oil change.
And you use synthetic, right?
I use full synthetic. I also drive, I haven't in the last year, but I also drive it regularly to work. So I'm putting probably close to, let's see, 400, 500 miles on it a week. So but I'm getting, but that's a lot of highway. So I have that balanced with what I do for autocross and when I do daily, pleasure commutes on the weekends and stuff like that. And it's working to about, like I said, about 6,000 to 7,000 miles between oil changes.
No, I read on something, everyone seems to want to stay away from the Fram oil filters. Is that true?
From my experience with the frame oil filters, when I've seen posted through tests and stuff, I know the standard like can style oil filters are not very good from them. They're fairly cheaply made. They can come apart. Their filtration is meh. But as anyone who's changed our oil filters know, we don't have a standard can style oil filter. Ours, if you haven't done your oil change, for those that haven't, ours there's a cap, and when you take that plastic cap off, the actual filament itself that's normally inside a standard oil filter is right there in the cap. And that's really all our oil filters are. There's no cap around it. There's no base plate. There's none of that. It is just the element itself that snaps into our cap and goes into the little spot where our oil filters go. Kind of nice, kind of economical, a lot less waste, of course. But I'm not sure with that style of filter how well the Frams stack up. Now, that being said, because everything else I use a standard filter on, from my Grand Prix when I had it to my truck to my fiance's Velociter, I stay away from Fram like the plague, unless it's their higher end stuff. Now, when I say Fram, I'm talking about their very cheap, just regular orange box filter. They also have a high mileage filter. They have some other filters. I think there's one that's got like a rubberized grip on it to twist it on, and that's a different level of filter from them. That's a better filter from what I've seen. But the standard orange box Fram filter, I won't touch. I'll do a Mobile One. I'll do K&N. I'll do an STP. I'll take anything else that's on the shelf other than that regular orange Fram box. So that's what I've seen. That's what I've read. That's what I understand. But like I said, for our Kappa filters, I'm not sure how that applies with the cartridge style, but because of that habit, I still do it.
Yeah, Mobile One's pretty much what I use, both the oil and the cartridge. Just I've done, I don't even know how many oil changes I've done so far, but I haven't had any problems with it either. So.
And I think overall, you're looking at a difference of maybe what, $7, if that.
Yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth the rebuild of the engine.
Exactly.
William Risch says that he uses Bosch filters or OEM.
I've used Bosch with very good luck with it. They're good filters, and of course, you can't go wrong with AC Delco, which I think is what OEM is.
Yeah.
One thing I've done when I take the filter out when I'm getting ready to change it is I'll inspect it, and I don't remember what brand it was. It might have been like a Purolator or something like that. When I took it out to change the oil, the filter element had basically disintegrated. It became detached from its holder. And that put a mental note on me that don't use Purolator again. And I think Fram probably has that same issue with their basic filters, is they don't hold up. And the whole purpose of the filter is to filter the oil, which means you need to have a good seal so that the oil goes through the filter material. And if your filter material breaks down, you're no longer getting any filtration.
So it's like stuffing a couple of coffee filters in there. And call it. All right, any other questions about oil or oil changes or anything oil related?
Doesn't look like it. So I was thinking we should touch base a little bit on the recalls. If somebody asked the question earlier through Messenger. So.
Well, we know the one big recall that everyone talks about is the seat, and Troy's kind of, I don't know if you want to be called the expert on that or not, but he probably knows more about it than certainly I do.
I've read up on it a little bit. I understand we have other recalls than that, so I'm assuming that's the one they're talking about since it's the most recent, but we also have the steering column recall. We also had the differential recall. I think that covers it.
Ignition key, yeah.
Yeah, that's steering column.
Oh, is that the ignition? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because we had
I just
two of
posted
those.
the link. If you go on the chat, I posted the link that you can check with your VIN number all the recalls that might have been performed on your car, and if they haven't, they will show up there as an option recall that you can get. That's the MyGM. It's my.gm.com/recalls. That's the website.
So what was the differential recall? What was the story there?
That was for your really early model base models. So the early 2007s, like mine, they forgot to put the extra additive in for the limited slip differentials. And this was also a recall that was done on the Cadillac CTS because we use the exact same differential as the CTS. So what was happening is that the differential was wearing, starting to whine, and was basically eating itself because it didn't have this additive in it. And if you had that issue, the recall was it'd go in, pull your diff, put a new diff in, put the additive in, and you'd be good. I believe it was mid-model 2007. They caught that and went, okay, we need to add the additive. And so later models don't have the problem. So it's mainly something specific to the early model 2007s. But it is something like I got my car used and it only had 44,000 miles on it when I got it. And it did not have that recall done. And so after I drove it for a while, I was backing out my parking spot at home and I'm like, I hear a whine from my butt area, which is about where our differential sits, and knew exactly what it was. Took it in. Luckily I had an extended warranty I had bought with the car. Took it in. They go, yep, your differential shot. We'll put a new one in. So it's still something that can plague people, but that's the classic. You'll see the post in the forum or on Facebook. Hey, I'm backing up. I hear this whine or grinding coming from like behind the seats. What is that? That would be your differential. You don't see it much like you used to, but you still see it.
So I'm aware of 3 recalls. One was the one you mentioned. Another one was they had a manufacturing problem with the seal, and some of them would fail and then contaminate the differential. And a third one was the vent hose was too short and it was puking fluid out. They had, in 2006 and early 2007, they had so many problems with differentials that you basically can't get one now. And they're unfortunately not rebuildable. So if you have a differential issue, you're looking at going to a recycle yard, or there are actually on the forum discussions about alternative differentials that'll fit.
Now, I thought the vent hose was a TCB and not an actual recall. Was that an actual recall?
Yeah, you may be right. Yeah.
I think the pinion seal, which I had forgotten about that one, but I think the vent hose is like, hey, if it's leaking, do this. Otherwise, forget it.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
I want
to post this real quick since we are talking about recalls. I'm going to post this in the chat. This is a link to NHTSA, NHTSA. That is the federal organization that handles all recalls and all safety recalls. That is the organization I went through when I got the recall done for the passenger seat. If you've had, and I want to mention this, I've mentioned this before, but on the forums and stuff, but I want to say this while we're here. If you've gotten the passenger seat recall done and the seat failed again, whether it was within the 1 year, hey, we'll replace it again period, or if it was after that, please document that through the NHTSA complaint system. You can go to nhtsa.com. They say, hey, do you need to file a complaint about your car? Click on that. File the complaint, let them know that it failed again, because what we're doing with GM, what they're doing for the seat recall is there's 2 particular ways they can recall it and fix it. The one is if you actually have the failure, and when you have the failure, you get the failure light saying the passenger seat airbag is not on, even though someone's sitting there, and there's a service airbag message in your DIC in the dashboard. That's an actual failure. However, this is my hypothesis from what I've researched on the topic. The seat does not fail immediately when it starts to fail. What happens is imagine you have a piece of paper and you start tearing that piece of paper. You haven't torn through it yet, but it's already torn. That's how this starts, is there's a ribbon in the seat that's about that wide, and it has a printed circuit within it, and it's like flexible material. The material can start to rip at its edge, but it won't get into the circuit yet, and the seat will still work. However, once that rip has started, it's going to continue no matter what you do. So let's say you have that rip started. You're not going to know it unless you take apart your seat and take apart the sensor mat. What GM will do is, if you don't have the failure, because it hasn't ripped through the printed circuit yet, is they'll put a piece of reinforcement tape on the mat and call it good. That may slow down the rip, but it will eventually rip through the circuit board anyway. And when it does, the mat fails. If you have a failed mat, they're still putting the tape on the mat, but they're giving you a brand new mat that hasn't started to tear yet. So if you've gone in, they've done the recall, and they didn't give you a brand new mat, and they just put the tape on and said you're good, and it fails again, you need to report that, because I honestly believe just putting the tape on a used mat is not a proper repair for this recall. And until we get the proof that that's happening through your complaints through NHTSA, we can't do anything about it. And I really want to push that, because I really think GM's fix for just putting the tape on is not a good fix.
Yeah, you'd think they'd redesign it or something so you wouldn't have to worry about it.
Well, to really get a design in there that isn't going to fail like this, you're going to have to redesign the entire system, and they're not going to do that. They're just not, and I don't blame them. I mean, you're talking millions and millions of dollars for 90,000 cars that haven't been built in 10 years. The tape fix isn't perfect, but the success rate of that fix was so good, was so much better than without it, that they deemed it with an acceptable failure rate. And I kind of agree with that. If you have a new mat with the tape on it, it's going to last unless you start like doing jumping jacks in the passenger seat. So I think a new mat with the tape is good, but just throwing on a piece of tape when you don't know if that mat has started to fail or not is just unacceptable.
Yeah. So
if I could
we have
chime in real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, this is Tom Brown. I'm in Akron, Ohio. Hello, everybody. One thing that I've always been careful of, and I see people do it all the time, is when they clean their windshield or they're cleaning the interior, they stick their knee down into the center of the seat. And I don't know if that has anything to do with additional stress in that area, maybe making that happen quicker. Just an idea. So
I'm sure it does.
Yeah. So William is saying, Troy, why bother getting it fixed until the mat actually fails? The recall is honored for life, or the recalls expire.
Recalls don't expire, technically. You ask NHTSA, and they're going to say, nope, recalls are good for the life of the car. However, the issue is, in reality, if the parts are no longer in supply, they don't have to honor the recall. Hey, we don't want to make the parts are no good. And with our cars being 10 years old, this is something that's kind of, a reality. So the issue becomes, let's say your car doesn't fail for another 5 or 6 years. You may go to GM and say, hey, this is under recall. And they go, well, you should have got it done earlier because we don't have any parts for it. This is the other reason why I'm so against this whole, hey, we're just going to slap a piece of tape on an existing mat and call it a fix. Because, again, if they had just replaced the mat with the tape to begin with, so you had a new mat with the tape, you're not going to have the failure in 5 years. You're not going to have that failure eventually that I know you'll have if they just threw tape on an already damaged mat. That's why I think that fix is just completely wrong. People like you have asked, why go in and get it fixed if it can eventually fail in the future? I say it's a crapshoot. It may fail in the future. It may not. We have seen, understand that this failure has not happened in a majority of cars. It's still a minority number of cars that have failed. It's just a very large minority of cars that have failed. And it's also going to depend upon use and everything else. But if it hasn't failed yet, and you wait, you do run the risk of not having a mat available to repair it under warranty, under recall later on. But if you get it fixed now and they just throw the tape on, and let's say a year and a half from now it fails, when you go to GM, they're going to tell you, oh, well, now you have to buy another mat. And that's kind of what you're looking at with this. Again, this is why you can see why, as I mentioned this, why this is fixed of just throwing the tape on, I find completely unacceptable, because it's really just putting some repairs off for GM that'll eventually still fall on the consumer, which it shouldn't.
It's the equivalent to putting a Band-Aid on it.
Literally, just about literally.
We got a comment. Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I just wanted to kind of ask one quick thing about that. Everyone kind of knows that we're sort of a parts bin car. Do they use our mat on any other cars? Like it seems like we share the Cobalt a lot of stuff with. Are we the only one with our sensor?
I will tell you this, because this is a big thing. When this first cropped up and people were saying, hey, why aren't you fixing this in our car? You fixed it on the CTS. Why aren't you doing it for us? GM's line was, your mat is unique to your car and no other car uses it. So the problem that happens with the CTS isn't necessarily the problem that you have with your mat car. That is true. However, that's like saying, because you wear an extra large t-shirt, your t-shirt is unlike the guy that's wearing a small t-shirt. They're completely different t-shirts, and your t-shirt doesn't work for him and his t-shirt doesn't work for you. When in reality, the difference has nothing to do with the design of the t-shirt. It just has to do with the way it's built for that application. And it's the same for our cars. Our mat is not identical to any other mat that's out there that's like this. However, the design of the mat and the reason the mat fails is the exact same reason why it fails on every other car it's failed on. Because it failed not only on the CTS, but failed on BMW, it failed on Mini, it failed on Kia, it failed on Suzuki. And it was all for the same reason. The mat bends, it kinks, and when it unkinks, that fold now starts to crack and break. And it has to do with it being, this is why you don't see mats in cars now. Passenger seat sensors no longer rely on mats. They have like sensors in the rails. They have different type of sensors now that are more robust and less likely to fail in ways like this. They've gone away from the mat. And unfortunately, we just happen to have a car that the first model year it was built was also the first model year that having a passenger seat sensor was required. So we're dealing with a very young technology in our cars.
Yeah. So hey, quick comment here. Kevin says he's a newly owner, 1 month coming out of an MGB that required maintenance in almost every use. If I want to do maintenance under my Solstice, what methods is recommended? Well, this is welcome to the Kappa family first, and this is what we're trying to do, and we're trying to go through a list of maintenance issues, and we'll go through that in further sessions. Although Rob sent me just an email with a list of 50 points of maintenance things to do on the Kappa platform. And Rob, is it okay with you to share that list on the, I'm sure it's on the forums already, and I've seen it somewhere.
That's why I sent it to you, because I couldn't figure out how to put it up.
Okay, well, I'll send it through here, and I can share the screen eventually as well. But I'll make sure to post it on the Facebook groups that we're hosting this through.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm assuming it's a very detailed list. Since he just mentioned earlier that there's 10 maintenance items just for the trunk alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure it's going to be pretty robust maintenance document.
I see Troy smiling. Yeah, this is a 10-year list, so it's been refined for a long time, and it's got a lot of the idiosyncrasies of the car. For example, the plastic wear tab on the top can cause the whole top to fail if you don't have it. And it's on the list, and I teach everybody how to go inspect it. And in fact, I have a crate of replacement tabs, I think the only ones that still exist, available for anybody that wants them.
So I'm sharing my screen now, and you can see the list. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and you can go. It's divided by exterior, engine bay, cockpit, and top. And there's the trunk, underside, which is very important. So I'll make sure to distribute this list if that's okay with you, Rob. So
yeah, it's organized this way because when you do the training class, you start out at one area at a time, and it's easier to organize it that way.
Yeah. So I can share the screen again, or I can just distribute this. One of the important parts from the class that I remember you were giving was the rubber components, especially around the windshield and, well, A-pillar. And, we need to make sure to put some electric grease around it so that it doesn't rot dry.
Yeah, it turns out that a lot of the rubber you can still buy, but there's apparently almost no source for the windshield rubber, which is why I'm glad I got 4 in my storage, but that's another story.
I have
But
two.
if you do two things, one is every time you put the top up, make sure you don't drag the pins across the rubber so you cut it, which is usually the way that they fail. And if you treat it at least once a year, if you live someplace like Phoenix where it's hot and dry, if it was me, I'd treat it once a quarter to make sure that it stays protected from UV and doesn't dry out so that it becomes brittle.
I see a lot of people recommend using something like WD-40. I mean, on those kind of parts. Does that actually do more harm, or does WD-40 okay?
WD-40 is not designed for rubber. It's actually a water displacer Formula 40 invented by an engineer in San Diego at Generous Dynamics, and it was designed to take water out of piping in the Atlas missile. And it has a little bit of oil in it because once it drives the water out, it leaves a light film of oil over the top of it to keep it from corroding later. But it's not a lubricant; it's a dryer. Back in the days when we still had points, I can remember many a time pulling my Volkswagen over and popping off the cap and spraying the inside with WD-40 because it got wet.
Good morning.
Morning. Hey, so go ahead.
I'll be really disappointed if they decide to do NASM like this.
Well, yeah, that might be in place actually, but let's hope we can still go to
Looks like
this year.
looks like Blaine's ready to go because he's sitting in his car. So
I'm planning on it.
So for those of you who don't know, Dave is the minion car.
He's under Denise account now, but his name is actually Dave.
I am actually Dave. Yeah, I am not Denise.
Are you sure?
I'm somebody's nephew. At this point, yeah. A little early, dudes.
Right, crisis of identity.
So William is asking an interesting question. He's like, for a future fix, do you folks have any info on the emulators that fool the car into thinking there's a person in the seat all the time? I know this is a risk for smaller people in the passenger seat, but would this be viable? Example being replacement of the seats to an aftermarket seat?
So there's a guy on the forum, maybe Troy can give more information about it, who's been working on a device for the passenger presence. You want to tell him about it, Troy?
Yeah, John WR is his name on the Sky forum. I think it's the same on the Solstice forum. I believe he's on both. And he, as an electrical engineer that was working on the problem, and the issue we have is, a lot of people just think it's a simple on-off switch. It's not. It's actually a data bus that runs between the module on the seat sensor pad itself and the control module for the airbag system. And so they have to do what we call a digital handshake to kind of know to talk to one another. And for that module on the airbag to let the main system know, hey, there's someone in the passenger seat, turn the airbag on. No, don't turn the airbag on. So the emulator is something that's not very simple to build. There is a company in Europe, I believe, that sells an emulator. It's supposed to be working with our cars. And some people have had good luck with it. Other people have not. And even John has had problems with his where it's like it works 80% of the time, but that other 20%, he's got to turn the car off, wait, and turn it back on and see if it'll work. So he hasn't perfected it. And once the recall came out, he's kind of like, well, no, I don't need to worry about it. I believe he started to kind of play with it since then. But I mean, ideally that would be a good fix for us in the long run, because there's going to come a point in time where the mat will fail and we won't have something to replace it with. And for me, I think having the driver have the option of turning the bag on and off is a lot better than just having the airbag off no matter what.
Well, see, John Shore's.
William says,
I'm sorry, I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, John Shore's answer also uses tape for all this stuff. He basically says all the time, just put the tape over top of whatever bulb is light up on your dash.
That's
Yeah.
right.
The tape fix.
Fix
Yeah.
it. Oh,
William says one of the European companies is Airbag 360. And then going back to the rubber greasing, Matt, hey Matt, he says
Hello.
water-based dressing, e.g. Maywires, hyper dressing, or weather strip lube, definitely not the WD-40.
So what I use is dielectric grease because I can get enough to do 10 cars for $7, and you can get it anywhere, Home Depot or anywhere, and it works. So
Yeah, I had the official like GM lube, and I found it left a white residue, which kind of sucks.
what I've discovered is, in given the maintenance class, rubber treatment is kind of like, what do you put on your top?
Yeah.
303 or rag top. And so I just tell people what I use, and they can use whatever they want. Just
They
to
will
use,
anyway.
Yeah.
It's more important with what not to use.
What about never wet on the top, Rob? It's called never wet.
it as long as it gives UV protection and keeps water out of it, then it'll work. It just, having been down this road many times on the forum, about every 3 years, being an anal retentive engineer, I contacted the guy who owns the company that makes the canvas, and he said use ragtop, and sent me the results of his testing, and I use ragtop.
That's right. I remember that.
And I use Never Wet.
Good.
I put it on 4 years ago and I haven't had to reapply it. It's still good 4 years later.
Are you sure the UV protection's still active?
UV protection is still on there. It should be. It's a Rust-Oleum product.
It's easy to test for repellent, but not as easy to test for UV protection.
The top looks as good as the day it was put on the car.
Perfect.
Speaking of the tops, I know one question I see on the Facebook every once in a while is whenever they say it's the beginning of summer and people say, I put my top in the trunk and it stays in the trunk until winter. Does keeping it folded in the trunk for a long period of time cause damage?
I wouldn't think so. It's made to go in the trunk.
Well, I guess because it's kind of stretched around the mechanics, you know what I mean, as opposed to being up on top where it's kind of like not loose, but it's kind of not being pulled any different way. I don't know if there's any research on whether that damages the top, because mine is down, mine's up. I mean, I go back and forth with it all the time, but I've heard people, they say, well, I just leave it in the trunk and forget about it for most of the year.
Hey, that's kind of funny because I know in the early days there was actually a product that one of the companies released. I think it was Kappas or somebody, that was a blanket that basically went on top of your top because people were worried about it rubbing on the carpet on the top of the roof of the trunk. So for me, I've always left it up when it's in storage and put it down when I want it down.
It's a Kappa blanket, and I invented it with Joe.
Ah, there we go.
Oh,
I remembered it. I just didn't remember where it came from.
we have the important people here. That's awesome.
Since Joe went out of business, he got married, and his wife said he had to get a real job. Taylor Threads at taylorthreads.com will make you one for $100 with custom embroidery. And the purpose of that of that blanket is when the top is in the trunk, dirt will come in, and it just inevitably does, and it'll get dirty. And the other problem is the top moves when it's in the trunk and it's in contact with itself. If you look at some cars, one side of the top may rub against the trunk side. I've actually seen more than one top damaged by rubbing against the side of the trunk. And they rub against the rubber feet that create a gray area, And when the rubber feet fall off, it'll actually cut all the way through the top, and then you got a hole. So that's why we invented the Kappa blanket.
Well, I should get one for autocross because I'm sure my top is spinning, flying around in that trunk, going around those cones. So maybe that's something I need to get.
Yeah,
me
2
both.
points here. William says he uses a yoga mat on the top when it's down for driving, and then Kappa mat says normally the fabric is stretched when the top is up, but when it's put down, I'd imagine the fabric would develop wrinkles.
Well, the challenge with the top being down is when it's up, it's only in contact with the car at points where it's designed to be in contact. So at the seals, at the side, and at the trunk. When it's in the trunk, folded up, it's in contact with a lot of things that it doesn't need to be in contact with, that potentially could create additional wear points, or at least through the pressure could potentially create issues. So I just don't understand why anybody would leave the top in the trunk, because it gets dirty. The inside of the car gets dirty, even with a car cover on there. If you leave it sit for 3 months, and I'm able to tell you about both my cars, and the last thing I want to do is give it more opportunities to get dirty.
Yeah. When I store my car in the winter, I put the top up, but I don't use the latch, so it's not all too stressed.
Yeah.
And William again says Taylor Threads makes awesome blankets, and they are happy to create any logo or color. There's another woman in the forum too that makes these Kappa blankets still, right, Rob?
Yeah. She brought some to the Nationals in Blackhawk.
Yeah. Circling back a little bit to earlier question, Chris, hi Chris. He says actually Best Buy has a service bulletin listed for their install shop personnel. It states very clearly, do not put knee in seat to risk of airbag sensor damage. So that's how usually they go. Just for your information, this session is being recorded, and for those who couldn't attend, we can post it later. Just an FYI.
One of the questions that was given to me before we even started here was talking about waxes and coatings and sealers and stuff like that. So the actual question was, with so many waxes, coatings, and sealers out there, what gives the best shine for the buck, ease of use, and durability?
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. What gives the best shine is carnauba wax. The problem with it is it wears off very easily, and so you have to keep reapplying it to get that shine. Generally, a good wax job will last about a month, maybe a little bit longer if you keep the car inside. But as you wash the car, you're actually washing the wax off, and then the paint will become dull. I'm going to attempt a ceramic coating on my Sky when I get it back from Brian here in a couple of weeks. The car was painted in January, and I'm going to put a ceramic coating on it. And I'm going to use the Adams product, and they say you'll have about 5 years of protection with it. So I'm going to give that a shot.
So here's what I do. I have an Adams wall on my garage. And
Yes, you do.
unfortunately, I have just about every product that he makes in gallons, because on garage day, everybody wants to come over and detail their car. So I've got every buffer he makes, just about every product he makes. And I ceramic coat all 5 of our vehicles once a year. And then for the ones that live outside, I use ceramic boost about once a month. And literally I drive my Tacoma in 3 feet of snow. I take it into the car wash and spray it down, and everything comes off. And I can do that 3 or 4 times before anything starts to stick. It's just really good stuff.
Yeah, I became a fan of Adams polishes when we were in Colorado in ever since then, I keep using them, and they're a fantastic product for real. Yeah.
What I found is the cheap stuff doesn't last very long. You really get what you pay for.
So there's a new topic from William Reach. Fan belts. How frequently can, or do we have to change them?
So we just went through that last summer. In our garage day, we started swapping out the power steering belt and the serpentine belt, and they were all factory original, and they were all showing signs of wear, but were still serviceable. We found 2 or 3 of them that had serious cracking in them. They probably would have gone a few more months, but not much longer. And we found that every car we looked at needed to have the brake fluid changed because nobody touched it. And it came out looking like coal dust.
Kappa Matt said, keep in mind that ceramic coatings are very valuable when you still have near perfect paint. If the car has not been protected throughout its life, a ceramic coating will be a waste of money.
Yeah. You need to start with a good finish.
Actually,
and you will.
We have a guy who, Skip, who is a master detailer. It's his hobby. He just likes to do it. And I've seen him take an 06 Solstice that looked like crap and spend 3 days polishing it and then ceramic coating it. And at 5 feet, it looks gorgeous.
At 5 feet?
Yeah, I mean, it's got road rash, and they pick it up on the sides and on the hood and stuff like that. But if you're standing far enough away so that you don't see every rock nick, it looks really good. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that any car can benefit from some polish and wax and a little ceramic coat.
TLC.
Yeah, that does. And sorry to jump in here late in the conversation. I'm kind of driving, but that is true. I do hobby as I do detail as a hobby, and you can make old paint. You got to keep in mind when you detail, all you're doing is working on the clear coat. That's what you're doing. So when there's like layers of clear coat, when you're shaving it off using compounds, you're just making everything all even to remove the scratches that you see. Yeah, you can't avoid working road rashes. I mean, it's gonna happen, right? I have a muscle cyst in the front, especially not autocross and whatnot. But let's just say you go ahead and get it detailed. Make sure that you get the rust. There's no rust on those little nicks in the front. Adding some kind of protection, such as the coating there, does help with it. It does protect it. It avoids further issues down the line. Most of the contaminants that you have is going to be from everyday driving or just picking up stuff from the ground, especially after it rains. You know, you got to think about all the acids on the floor, on the road that jumps up and contaminates your paint. When you detail, all you're doing is just removing everything from it. So again, detailing is about getting rid of the contaminants that's on top of the clear coat. And then when you put the protection on top, it's just to help it not stick to it as often. Now, I heard someone mention earlier about 5 years of protection. I'm not sure if that's the accurate 5 years. I would definitely say like 1.5 to 2 years. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's kind of hard to believe. But again, with the question that one of the guys mentioned here is, I still think that even an older vehicle, older paint, you can still put some protection on there, and you will benefit from it. But you got to weigh out the costs on that one, I guess, as well.
Cool.
Or you can come to Garage Day. If you come to Garage Day, you get to use the stuff for free.
I want to live closer to you,
There we
Rob.
go.
Right?
And where's this?
In Parker, Colorado.
Yeah, I'm like Central Florida. Kind of far.
It's a little of a drive, yeah.
I was say you have to pay a lot to drive there in order to get different products.
Yeah, especially when I
Yeah.
have this stuff myself. But for others that don't have the equipment, I mean,
Yeah. I got a question here from Tom Brown. Tom, you're sending messages privately. You probably want to switch to everyone. Anyway, it says, my power steering is really stiff. I checked the fluid and it's fine. Does anyone else have this problem? Is there a fix? Anybody? No.
Something like that, you're just going to have to. It's really hard when someone says stiff, because what may be stiff to one person may not be stiff to somebody else. But at that point in time, if your power steering, if the fluid looks good, at that point in time, you're kind of going down the rabbit hole of, well, what do I look at next? You may want to, because I don't know what kind of tests they have for this kind of stuff, but you could have a leak in the rack somewhere. So you're going to want to look for wet spots on the rack, wet spots on the subframe, wet spots on the floor to see if you have any leaks like that. And if not, at that point in time, you're going to have experts getting into things like, the pump and the rack itself.
Could
I
also,
was going to say, I
Could
wish I didn't have power steering.
You wish you didn't.
also be the ball joints. It could be getting rusty, especially if the seal's been cracked and the water's gotten in there.
Or
Is
dirt.
there a way to flush the power steering fluid in the rack? Is there to do that safely?
there is a way. I just gotta find it. But someone just mentioned possibly contaminated fluid. There's the only thing I can think of is if it's not leaking or anything like that.
I saw a post on one of the forums, or it could have even been Facebook. Somebody changed, they took the whole steering column out and they had some pump they got from a Saturn View or something and did some type of swap, and this guy can spin his wheel with his finger. There's no way I could do that on my car. This was just recently I saw it. This guy had the whole column out, and he had some pump and then some module he had to buy off of eBay to make it work. But this guy, and I think he autocrosses because he had a totally different speedometer cluster in there. It was all digital. And this guy was spinning his steering wheel with his finger. So that's the reason I was asking.
Kappa Matt said, stiff steering can be caused by any of the following: fluid leveling conditions, suspension damage, pump failure. You can remove the lines and turn the steering wheel side to side with the engine off. So we have about 6 minutes left in this session. Any final comments to close it?
Keep a roll of black tape handy for those idiot lights.
Yeah. I have
Very
many
good point.
stickers.
I will make that list that Rob made available somewhere on maybe in the invitation of the Kappa and Coffee sessions, so that people can download it. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll just post it on all the Facebook pages we have.
So
I have a quick question for Mike.
Yeah.
How do you like your RPM stage 3 so far?
I don't know, because I don't have the RPM stage 3.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
have-
You have the
Yeah, I have the stage 2. Well, right now, it's not stage anything. But at the time, I had the stage 2. It's a Franken Sky. Yeah, I had the stage 2 from RPM for my normal 2.4, and it does make a difference.
okay.
Up on the Facebook pages, I actually posted some dyno numbers. And off the top of my head, I think to the wheels before the stage 2, it was like 134. And then after the stage 2, which included the larger injectors, a tune, and I did the high flow catalytic converter. And it went to like 161, 164, something like that to the wheels. So it was, it's certainly not a turbo. It's certainly not a supercharger, but yeah, it does make a difference. I mean, wasn't too expensive for the little extra horsepower. And it definitely, livened it up a bit.
I got the stage 2. Sorry to interrupt there, but I got the stage 2 on the GXP. I don't know if the original question was for someone that had the LNF or the 95.
I didn't hear the end of that.
So the original question was towards what motor, the one that came with the turbo or the naturally aspirated one?
Whoever, I don't know who asked the question.
It was me. For some reason, I was thinking you had the red line, but you got the Frankensky. So,
Yeah.
but it's a red line question because.
So I have the stage 2 on the GXP from RPM. I would say that I was happy at first, then I became not so happy about it. Then I realized that I was just having problems with the car. It wasn't anything related to RPM's fault. Now there was a huge increase in power just from stage 1. You can definitely tell. The issue that I was having is the whole misfire issue. Eventually, I just found out that I need piston rings. Obviously, loss of compression. I can't make the power right. But even with that, I was still dynoing about 290 to the wheels. Okay, and that was with the issue. Of course, people were supposed to get over 300 with the RPM. Now, the good thing about the RPM one was that it was still very conservative. So it wasn't like going full out, and I was still making that power, and I was still doing very well when they came to autocross with that. Keep in mind, I also have 2 other friends who tune as well, and I sent the tune over to them, and they thought it was a good tune as well.
You know, I think we will have to have another session all about tunes because, you know, stage 1, 2, 3, whatever, is just a marketing labeling, if you will, from RPM. There's really no stages in tuning. However, depending on the components that you are adding and how the tuning is actually performed, and if it's a turbo or a base model, there's so many variants. I think we have to do another session on tuning alone. And, you know, we have all these people that know more about this. And we can invite RPM, if you will, or DDM, or anybody that is willing to talk about this. We have 2 minutes left. We will be doing this every weekend, same time, same. We might have to change that because there's some people, depending on availability of the panelists, we'll have to change the time and date. And also maybe Saturdays instead of Sundays for people who go to service on Sundays. We might have to be a little bit more inclusive, I guess, and try to accommodate for
and thought
people.
it was yesterday.
Right. So, but we'll try to do this every weekend. And I think 1 hour is a little too short because there's so much to talk about. And unfortunately, I do need to leave today, so I can't keep this going any longer. Otherwise, I would stay longer if you guys wanted to. But I can make somebody else a host.
I'm sorry.
So I'll make Mike the host now. And if you guys want to stay longer, feel welcome to stay longer. I just need to go, but I'll just leave the meeting going. Is that okay?
That's fine. Does anybody want to end here, or do we want to continue?
I'll continue. I got 3 more hours of a drive, so I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm good for now. And Salvador, I want to say thank you for setting this up and hosting this for us. It's been a big help. I know how that's a lot of extra work on your end.
Absolutely.
It's my pleasure. I'm a big, passionate lover of the Kappa platform, and I love you guys. So, you know, my pleasure.
All
Thanks, Sal.
All right. See you soon. Take care.
Okay, so now he made me the moderator, and I have no idea what that means.
I think when you close it, we're done.
Oh, okay.
You gotta buy the coffee and donuts.
Yeah. Well,
Sweet.
actually, we're talking about the stage 2 and stage 3. I don't have the red line or the GXP, but what is? I believe the stage 2, he adds new charge pipes and a tune. I don't know if they change the injectors or anything, but what's about the stage 3? Is it just a tune, or is there something else hardware added?
So yeah, it should be the turbo because stage 1 is just the pipes. Stage 2 is the downpipe, and then stage 3 is obviously you got the intake, everything, all the bolt-ons plus an upgraded turbo. either the stock one with the replacement wheel or a complete different turbo.
Okay, so it isn't just a tune, it's other hardware as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you do just a tune with the charge pipes, that'll be like what he calls the stage one, or what everybody calls the stage one. Then the stage two is, like I said, the downpipe added to it, maybe a cold air intake. And then stage three is just all of those previous parts plus the somehow upgraded turbo.
Okay.
Don't forget
Now,
map sensors.
I'm sorry?
Sorry?
Don't forget your map sensors. If you really want to cash in on the tune upgrade, you need upgraded sensors.
Oh,
Which,
yeah.
which I'm going to be doing today and looking at where the heck that thing's located. What a pain in the ass that's going to be.
Actually, the map sensor on the 2.4, and I think it's on the same place in the 1 is in the same place in the 2.0. It's not too bad. It's just kind of buried behind the throttle body. And you kind of have to get in there to pull it out. And then it's under kind of between the throttle body and our fuel rail on the 2.4.
Well, I plan on today, unless something comes up, I plan on changing my injectors today. So I'm hoping pulling that fuel rail out will give me room to get in there to change it. But we'll see.
It's a pain with the fuel rail in place. If you're pulling the fuel rail, it'll be a piece of cake.
Okay, cool.
Hey, Mike, on the sensors, did you get the harnesses to plug in, or are you going to splice and solder?
On the sensors.
Buy the harnesses, Mike.
Wait.
Harnesses.
Quick, here's the thing. What year is your car, Mike?
A 7.
Okay. In the 07s, we have a different. You guys got to remember that Mike and I have 2.4, so we're a little different than the 2 liters. On the 07 2.4s, on some of them, they have a different map sensor than 2008 and later. If you're dealing with a 2008 or later 2.4, there's a map sensor you can get that just plug and play, drops right in. In ours, you still have that same map sensor, but it's harder to find. It's a different part number. I found this out when I did mine. I got a 3-bar from PAW for the 2.4, and I went to plug it in, and it physically wouldn't fit in the intake manifold. It was a physically different size. And so I found out why that was. So you can find them. As long as it fits the manifold, I think you should be fine on the harness. I don't think there's a different harness with ours. The 2 liters, yes, there's a different harness if you go to the different map sensor.
Well, Martin Scott's the one that he actually literally sent me the link of where to purchase it. So I'm assuming he knows enough that it should be fine. So.
Yeah, Martin and I kind of went round with that. So yeah, he knows. He should be good.
Gilbert sells the same setup as well, the same harness as well.
Oh, okay.
But see, with the 2.4, that was just it. I went through Dave Gilbert at PAW, and he wasn't aware of the difference on the earlier model cars on the 2.4s. And that's because that's not his doing. People like Mike and I were kind of weird, and there's not a lot of us.
I agree with that.
Thank God. Well, I can't remember, Troy. Is yours an 07 or an 06?
Mine, well, Skies don't have an 06, and
that's right.
Matt called me out because I forgot the Solstices had an 06 a while back. But yeah, it's an 07, but it's an early build 07. It was I think April of 06 is when it was built. And just for the record, an early model 2007 Saturn Sky is anywhere from December of 05 to June of 06. July of 06 and on are later build 07s.
Which thankfully I have. Well, now you got a whole new engine, so you're just,
Well, and when we're talking about this map sensor, I believe the change was in 08 when they went to the different ECM and the 2.4s. The 2 liter turbo cars had the same ECM system from day one. With the 2.4s, the 06s and 07s had a different ECM than the 08s and later, and that's the reason why the map is different.
Interesting.
Well, the things you learn when you work on these things like this.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't remember what the original injector size was on a stock, but I went from that to I think 36 pounds with my stage 2, and now I'm going to 60 pounds with the turbo. So
The original injectors on the 2 liters were actually the same injectors that GM used on the 2.2 Ecotechs. So the original injectors are small for a 2.4 to begin with. I think they're a 24 pound, 26 pound. I remember when Martin told me what size they were, I was like, are you kidding me? That's it. that's all we had. But they're very small. They're like a 24 pound injector, 26 pound injector, something like that.
Oh, okay. Now, how much boost are you getting out of yours?
I am getting 15 currently because I haven't cranked it up yet. The plan is to reach 25. I shouldn't say the plan. The plan is 450 wheel horsepower and 91 octane. To get that kind of power out of this turbo, we're assuming that we're going to be at 25 psi. I can tell you though, I had the KO4 stock redline turbo on my 2.4. I then went to Martin's big wheel KO4, and now I've gone to this WR4 turbo from PAW. And on the KO4 big wheel, I ran 15 pounds of boost. And I say that I'd have boost spikes up to 15.9, which is the reason why I lost my head gasket. But that turbo at 15 PSI is nothing compared to this WR4 at 15 PSI. This WR4 produces so much more power because it's moving so much more air at that same boost level. It is a night and day difference. It really is that huge. And that's something I want to talk about just real quick. Don't get hung up on boost numbers so much because boost numbers are so variable based upon the size of your engine, how that air is moving into the engine, the size of your turbo, and how much air that turbo is moving, that boost pressure. There's a lot of variables that go into how much power a car makes other than boost pressure. So don't get so hung up on, if you're dealing with the same turbo, yeah, going to 20 PSI versus 15 is going to be a difference. But don't get hung up on that when you're dealing with other turbos that are not the same turbo as what you're running on the same setup that you're running.
Cool. Actually, we got a comment and question from Kappa Matt. The comment looks like it says, map sensors should always be upgraded if you're increasing boost. I've seen way too many cars with the stock sensors pushing 23 PSI. And the question is, balance shaft sprockets. Replace them when doing the chain or not?
I don't know. I had 140,000 miles and built a new engine, so I changed everything. Everything started from scratch.
When I just timing a mile 2 weeks ago, us rockets look completely fine. I have about maybe 60,000 miles, but I've been running it hard, and the guides broke. So that's why I was in there aside from the head gasket and whatnot. So I didn't see any reason why to replace the sprocket unless you physically see it being damaged.
I know sprockets can wear, but I've not seen anything on any of the Ecotechs, and that's 2.0s, that's 2.2s, 2.4s, Cobalts, HHRs, R-cars. I've never seen any data or any information on our sprockets wearing over time. I just haven't. And I don't know if that's just not enough mileage or they just don't wear.
Yeah, it seems like it's more the guides that are the problem.
Yeah.
I will say this, right? And I got this from Brian Cooper. When I did my entire, when I tore the engine down, was in rebuilding for Little Patriot, he said, don't even worry about the balance chain. He says, typically, when it comes to PM maintenance, replacing your timing chain is one thing. He doesn't even recommend changing out your cam sprockets, but I put in new, performance cam sprockets.
Well, if you're in there anyway, you might as well do what you got to do.
He said, but if the balance chain, if all that looks good, there's not that much tension on it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
I did not change my cam sprockets at all. I just left them there. Used the same one, been fine. Now, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, this has nothing to do with the cam sprockets or anything, but the water pump. I think a lot of these water pump failures is really not the water pump itself, but just the gaskets or the seals that are around them. Because whenever I put the turbo on, I had everything taken apart anyway. We figured plus I was smelling, I didn't really see any leaks, but I could smell the antifreeze, so I knew something was going on. And when we pulled it, the actual pump looked fine. So it was probably just the rubber. They have like a little rubber grommet or whatever you want to call it that goes in there. That's probably what was gone. So I probably could have just pulled that, put a new, gasket or whatever, and then put it back in. But I don't know if, I mean, the biggest part is obviously taking apart of the labor, but in the cost of the pump is like nothing. So you might as well change it. But I think a lot of these pump failures aren't actual pump failures. It's just the seals or whatever, or what's leaking. But
Yeah, actually the main coolant feed for the water pump comes from the back of the engine, the thermostat back there. And that's called a water transfer pipe. It's got on the LNF at least, I don't know on the 2.4, but there's a little jog in it essentially to get around some of the turbo fittings there. And the seals are just 2 O-rings, and this thing just sits in there loosely.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a super great seal, and I've seen people do the water pump and not replace these O-rings. And you got to do everything. You can't skimp out, because if you're going to do it once, you don't want to do it twice. Just get it done, Yeah. I've seen most of the leaks on the water pumps coming from the weep hole up top. There's like a little side port for it. So I don't know where everybody else has seen it, but that's where I've seen it the most.
Yeah, I just want to let Capman know that on the 2.4, that pipe is the exact same thing as on the 2.0. It's just that jog isn't there. That's the only difference. The O-rings on each end are the exact same thing. And I also want to agree. I want to say too, I was meant to touch on this, talking about the map sensors. People say, oh, with the trifecta tune, you don't need to change your map sensors. You can just use your stock map sensors. I just want to agree here with Matt that if you're increasing your boost, change the damn map sensors. You're going to be going with a new tune anyway. They can change it when you do your tune. The map sensors are not that hard to change. Your computer is going to get an accurate reading of what your boost pressures are, so it can do the job it's designed to do. It's not that big of a jump. It's not that big of a cost. Do it right. I can't stress that enough. Just do it right.
But you have to have access to a tuning module. You gotta calibrate that motor.
Well, that's just it. If you're if you're increasing your boost anyway, that's already assumed, because you can't increase your boost without a tuning module on a 2-liter.
Yeah, I screwed up and didn't put mine on when I did the tune. So now I have to go back and I have to retune. But she's running hot. I mean, I haven't put her on the dyno yet, but she's running super hot.
So you didn't change the map sensor?
I didn't. I totally spaced it.
Well, but like I said,
I had a Bosch in there because it had a GMPP tune in it, right? Originally, the GM tune. So, but she's running. I mean, Martin currently suggests that I'm probably 320 to the 315 to 320 to the wheels. We'll find out when I throw it on the dyno. So.
Well, when you say running hot, what is your number for temperature?
No. I mean, no, she's running well.
Oh, I think you said
she's
hot.
Running super well.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant
she's running very well, as a matter of fact.
I hear my car's running good too.
That's what I hear.
Wait, John, your car's running?
Hey, mine's not. Well, mine technically runs, but not well. Which I actually wanted to ask you guys this now that we're kind of the sort of topic here. I want to go ahead and use a cherry picker to remove my engine so I can rebuild it completely from the bottom up. Where would I mount the chains on this cherry picker? Usually I see like hooks on other engines that I worked on, but I have no idea what to hook it up to. What's the safest place to hook up cherry picker to remove the engine from the vehicle?
I have some experience with this. My friend and I, we did an engine replacement using one of the name of the company is facing on me right now, but there's an engine distributor in Grapevine, Texas that distributes Ecotech engines for sand rails. So we picked up one from them, and it had some brackets already bolted onto the front and back of the engine. Basically, what you're going to want to do is find any good sturdy piece of scrap steel that you can drill a hole in, and find a nice large diameter bolt hole, and just basically bolt it there. Make sure the chain isn't tensioning against any of the components on the engine, and it should be fine.
Okay. So what was like the you say it was the front and the back, right?
Yeah. So any hole, and you're going to want to get one that's a horizontal bolt hole. If you try to do vertical, it's going to have a higher chance of just stripping the threads out. You want to have a shear load.
Okay.
So make sure it's not a vertical bolt, like a valve cover bolt. That would be a bad idea, and that wouldn't be a big enough diameter anyway. But yeah, there should be plenty of threaded holes on the front and back of the engine to get a nice engine leveler chained on there, and then get it hoisted out.
Gotcha. I'll look into it and see. Yeah, because I'm used to, like, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. That already engines come with the plates already and have like a little hook up the chain to, you know, not be finding a way to find them myself.
Cool.
I'm hoping by sometime next month or the month after I can go ahead and rebuild the whole engine.
Did you ever get the cylinder head off?
I did get the cylinder head off. I put it all back together. I thought.
No, I mean, did you take it off again after we talked about the compression issues?
No, I didn't take it off again.
Okay.
No. So I figured that at this point I might as well. I will have the time to take everything apart. So I might as well just basically what I'm doing. The reason I'm driving right now is because I just went and dropped off some stuff at my parents' house. I'm moving most of my equipment over to them because I'm sure, like I mentioned to you before, I was having some issues. So I'm going to bring my vehicle over here, and I already talked to my parents like, hey, I want to get this thing running. So I'm using their yard, and I'm going to be taking the whole engine apart. Just might as well just put forged internals in there, so rods and pistons, right? So.
Well, it really depends on your horsepower goals. If you're looking to just have an LNF that runs like any other LNF, then I would just do a stock rebuild on it, and I would inspect the components carefully to make sure you don't have to replace anything that you don't have to, essentially. If you're gonna just throw money at it, then yeah, go ahead, put forged internals and everything in there, and you'll have a stout engine, and you'll be able to put a big turbo on it and make a bunch of power. But it depends on what your end goal is with the car.
Well, I'm not trying to go anything over 350 through it.
Then you really don't need anything above stock LNF internals.
Okay, so I can just go and get the rings, then the block out the machine shop. Ultimate goal is high performance driving events and get time. Obviously, I need a roll bar, but I'm trying to get this thing running so I can go ahead and put the funds into that roll bar. And a top as well. I don't know which top to go with though, but that's in the future. The biggest thing is to get this engine properly running, be healthy again like it should be. I'm just glad that we figured out, you and I, the whole the pigtail, the connector from the cylinder one is working, because I was worried about my soldering skills there. But,
you know, and honestly there, Jay, you just had the cylinder head worked on, right? That's why I told you to take it off again, is because if there's a compression issue right now, the most likely and logical area where it's coming from is that cylinder head.
You're saying the valve seats, right? That's what you're saying, mentioned last time.
Yeah, I mean, valve seats, if it's cracked at all, you said you were getting the head ported, right?
No. So all I did just had them inspect it and clean it, and they replaced the valve stem seats. They said the guys were fine, everything was fine. They cleaned the valves because they were dirty from oil and whatnot. But they never mentioned anything about issues.
Okay. Well, you should really just take a real close look at the valve job that they did and just make sure that your issue is not there, instead of going and replacing your bottom end, because that's a lot of money for no reason if that's not the problem, you know.
Yeah, I mean, for bottom end, you're saying I don't really need to replace anything. I mean, as long as everything looks good, it's just the rings, right?
It could be a cracked piston. It could be a cracked cylinder wall. It could be rings. There's a lot of options.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's one of those things that until you get into it, you're not going to be exactly sure what it is.
Exactly, and I completely agree. Yeah, so I guess I'll go ahead and take the head off and maybe send it to a different shop. I'll take a look at it myself. But is every single valve supposed, when it's closed, supposed to be even throughout the whole head, or are they going to be like a couple of them are going to be slightly open?
Well, if you have the camshaft installed, naturally some valves will be open.
Okay.
But if you're taking the cylinder head off, well, I don't think you have to take the camshafts off to take the cylinder head off. I'm not entirely sure on that one. Yeah. So
No, you don't. You can get all the cylinder head bolts out with the cams in place.
okay. So what you could do is you could leave the cams in place if you want, or remove them depending on your mechanical skill, and essentially take a look at the valve seats to see if when they're supposed to be closed, if they are fully seated. What was your compression loss again? What were you seeing? I can't remember.
It was like 90 on cylinder 1 and 120 for the rest of the cylinders.
Okay, so that is a fair amount of compression loss, but it doesn't necessarily indicate like a total massive failure, like a hole in the piston, So I would say that there is a real possibility that it's just a bad valve job on cylinder 1.
Okay. I'll have to wait to move the car over though, so I can have more timing to work on it again. But
Yeah.
now that I took everything apart, I can do it all again in like an hour and a half now. The good thing about it took me about a day to take everything apart, and now I can do it like in 30 minutes. I can access to my timing.
That's good. I like it when people get on their cars.
It's hilarious to me. It always cracks me up. Like the first time, it always takes long, but the second time, like I said, like right before you and I spoke, like that morning, I took everything apart in 30 minutes.
All right. I think we might try to wrap up here. Does anybody have anything else to bring up before we call it a day?
Anybody got some stock ZOK springs?
I don't.
My H&R springs are kind of stiff.
Hey, Mike, I have a question.
Yeah.
Any chance of getting like guest people in on this, like Dave from DDM or Martin from RPM or Dave from PAW, just maybe to help answer some technical questions or give some advice or whatever?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we kind of brought that up with our little test session that we did. And every week what we're going to try to do, like today was pretty much, the topic was, general maintenance and maintenance. And so every time we do this, we're going to try to come up with general topics. For instance, Salvador was talking about tuning. I mean, we could do a whole session just on tuning alone and the different stages and stuff. So once we kind of figure out what the topic is going to be, then we'll reach out to the vendors who we think is going to be best, knowledgeable in whatever that topic is. So, if we're talking about, the windscreens or whatever, we can bring the windscreen people in. So yeah, to answer your question, we do plan on doing something like that in the future, bringing other people in. So, and that was why we were also talking about, we may end up not always being Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time, simply because we have to see what their schedules are. So it might be on a Saturday, it might be on, who knows what, it might be an evening during the weekday, who knows. But what I'll do is, me or whoever, will just keep putting new events out there and updating the event and when the day is and when the time is and whether we're going to continue with the Zoom. I think the Zoom is fine. I mean, we've used it with our business many times. So, and I haven't seen any security issues, but we'll see what happens, so yeah, to make that answer much longer than it had to be, yes.
There are known security issues with Zoom, no doubt about it. But they've also put in security patchwork as well. Our IT guy within our medical device company, they've already kind of done the stress test on it as well, and he found no issues with it. So.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Because there was somebody that offered a different version of something. I can't remember what it was, but I think this is very easy to use.
I use GoToMeeting. I use GoToMeeting a lot, and it's not as good as this.
Yeah, and then with Sal, having it through the university, I'm sure the university and all of their students and stuff, they're going to make sure that everything's going to be working well. So, and I know with the free version, I think of Zoom, you only get 40 minutes and so many attendees, and that's why when Sal stepped up and said, "Hey, we can use my Zoom," I was pretty excited about that. But anyway, I think this went pretty well for the first time, and hopefully we continue it, and hopefully this freaking virus ends and we can all get out there and do our cars and coffees for reals, and go from there. So unless somebody else has something to bring up, I'm going to stop the recording and shut her down.
I'm late to work on my pool. I need to get going.
All right.
All right, guys, have a good one. Stay safe.
See ya.
Thanks, Mike.